everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are doing some Father's Day cards. I need 4 Father's Day cards for various family members, and so I am going to use something that I purchased a while back from Tailored Expressions. You've seen this from me before. I actually made calendars. I made a calendar for my husband with it, and I thought that this would be a great way to continue to get more use out of this particular stencil set and use some Distress Oxides and do some inking on some KRAFT cardstock, which is something that I don't really do very often. And I wanted to revisit it because it's a great technique and it's a great use of these particular Distress Oxide inks. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. I will list all of the inks I'm using down below, but I used Mowed Lawn, Bundled Sage, I think, Vintage Photo. I used Tumble Glass, Blueprint Sketch, Pine Needles, and something else. I can't remember, but like I said, I will list those down below. The first thing I'm doing is I'm just taking some scraps of cheap, I think this is Paper Studio cardstock, so cardstock from Hobby Lobby. And I am just using these blending brushes that I purchased from Amazon, and I'm really pleased with them. Really pleased with them. They feel very comfortable in the hand. They are pretty reminiscent of the Altenew ones that are out on the market, except that they're colored. The Altenew ones are all black, but these are very, I'm very pleased with this purchase. We'll just put it that way, but that's where I did get those, is from Amazon. Anyway, I'm just quickly ink blending a big splotch on this white cardstock here. I'm going to eventually die cut from this little circles. That is going to be part of the design element on these cards, just to add some more interest and color, because I'm going to do a lot of, the majority of the card is going to be KRAFT. And the KRAFT cardstock is new to me also. The KRAFT cardstock is actually from, I get all of my colored cardstock from a cardstock warehouse now. I feel like that is a great, I feel like I get great quality, and the more you buy, the more you save. And so I feel like it's a very cost-effective purchase for me also. I've been very pleased with my purchases from there. And so that's where I get all of my colored cardstock. And this KRAFT cardstock is from Meterica. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's Meterica KRAFT. It's 92 pounds, so it's not super heavyweight. But I like the color of it. And it has some more texture on the front of it, so it would definitely not be something that I would want to better press with, or not better press, excuse me, foil, glimmer foil with. I just don't think that you would get good results. I think you'd end up being frustrated and wasting a lot of material and time. So I don't think it would work for that, but it has worked beautifully for this. I made card bases out of it, and I was very, very pleased with this particular purchase. And it is, like I said, very new to me. So after I ink blended all of those, I'm moving on to another design element that's going to be on these cards. I'm using that same scrap cardstock, so that's still the Paper Studio cardstock. And I have this stamp set from Tailored Expressions. A lot of the products that I'm using today are from Tailored Expressions. They are a new to me company. I've been purchasing a lot of their stuff, and the Greetery as well, over the past several months, and I have really enjoyed their products. And this little tree set is no different. I think this is called, the stencil set is called The Great Outdoors. I can't remember what this one is called, but like I said, I will list that below. And I'm going to create essentially like ombre trees. So I am putting Tumble Glass and the Blueprint Sketch on various parts of this. My Blueprint Sketch kind of got away from me a little bit and overpowered my Tumble Glass a little, but it's fine. And I used my fingers to kind of dab off and blur the line where the two colors met a little bit. I did get a little bit of ink transfer from one ink pad to the other doing it this way. You could use a blending tool, you could use a paper pouncer, you could use a little sponge dauber, whatever you want. I just went direct to paper because if you do end up getting a little bit of ink on your ink pad like I did, you can see a little bit of that blueprint sketch on that tumbled glass ink pad. You can either wipe it off, or I'm going to do some more ink blending in a minute. So it's going to come off and it's not going to wreck your ink pad. So I'm going to continue to do this. I did stamp things twice just so that I could get a better impression. My ink pads are still very, very juicy from the last time I gave them a spa day, but I'm going to do this twice. So I'm going to have 6 panels. No, excuse me. I'm going to have 4 panels with 2 trees each panel. So this one I did blueprint sketch and tumbled glass. The next one I'm going to do, I think this is bundled sage. No, it's peeled paint. That's what it was. Peeled paint. And I think I do pine needles. Yeah, pine needles. So I'm going to do the same thing. Just put one of the colors toward one end of the tree, so toward the trunk, and then the other one toward the top of the tree. Use my finger to blur the lines so that I don't get such a harsh edge, and then stamp it down, usually twice, just so that I can get a good impression. My ink pads are very juicy, like I said, but I still had a tendency to miss some spots. So I did end up doing things twice just so that I could get a very good impression. Once I was done with that, I set those off to the side. I'm going to use my brother's Scan and Cut to cut those out, but for now, I'm kind of letting everything dry a little bit, and I'm moving on to the Great Outdoor Stencil. This is, like I said, from Tailored Expressions, and I want to do 4 of these, so I want to do it on 2 separate panels, and the reason for that is that there is a die that comes that you can purchase that will cut these out, but I don't have those dies. So I'm using what I've got in my stash. You could hand cut these out if you wanted to, but I'm just using some dies from my stash. But the thing is that with the dies that I'm using, the pattern will blend into one another. So I don't have enough room to just stencil these all in one pass. In the corner of a cardstock, and then use my dies to cut them out. I would end up cutting into the other design. So I'm doing things a little bit different, and I will tell you that I didn't do this exactly right, and I ended up having to chop some parts off just because I had ink and pen marks where I didn't want them. So here I'm finding out that I can't do the 2 on the bottom like I thought. I'm going to have to do them in opposite corners. So I'm going to have to stencil designs that are in opposite corners because I didn't have room. So here we're moving right into the stenciling. So I have taped off and masked off the parts that I didn't want to ink right now. I have another piece of this cardstock. This is just an 8.5 by 11. It just worked better to do it on a much larger piece of cardstock instead of having to chase around smaller pieces and do more figuring on making sure things fit. So one of the things I'm going to do is this has registration marks. Most stencils nowadays have registration marks either etched into them or, little die cut segments out like this. Originally, I thought I could, put this, shift the stencil over on the same piece of cardstock and get the other 2 patterns, but that doesn't work. Just again, because of space and the dies I'm using. You might be able to do that if you purchase the dies that actually come with this set, but I can't do that with the dies that I'm using today. So I just picked a green, and I reference back to the stencil packaging often, just so that I can see what colors I'm about to stencil with. So I'm repeating that same process again with a different color. I've moved my masks, and I'm making sure that I'm lined up in those squares in the corner, and I'm using a vintage photo to ink blend these in. This goes super, super quick with these big ink blending brushes and a very juicy ink pad. I mean, this is not sped up at all. In editing, this is literally how fast it goes. It's lickety split. Here's Blueprint Sketch, a different section. There are 4 stencils to each of these. There are 4 stencils in this pack. So there's 4 colors you could do. And I'm doing just a straight wash of color, but you could obviously look how awesome and vibrant that blueprint sketch is on that KRAFT cardstock. That's so pretty. But granted, I love blue, so I would think it was pretty regardless. Anyway, here's that tumbled glass on a different section. So like I said, I'm just doing a flat wash of color. I liked that bold, vibrant, kind of modern, abstract, geometric kind of look. But if you wanted to do like really detailed ink blending, you could obviously use a smaller blending brush. You could even come in here with like colored pencils or something like that. Watercolors if you wanted to. I don't know how well that would work because Distress Oxide inks are water-based. Here I'm showing you, even though I'm a little off screen here, I'm showing you how detailed the stenciling is on here. And I was concerned that because my ink pads were really juicy, and this cardstock has some texture, that it would bleed outside of the lines. And it only did just a teeny tiny bit on what I assume is supposed to be like the sun or the moon in that bottom left stencil there. So now I'm going to do the opposite stencils. So this does the ones that are more of like a hexagon or banner shape. And I wanted to just show you the difference. So remember at the beginning of the video, we stenciled on we ink blended on some white cardstock, the same colors. Well, I want to show you the difference between the white and this KRAFT here, how different the colors look. So that is, I think, Evergreen Bough. And I'm off screen because that's super helpful. There we go. So look how different those look when they're stenciled on on different colors. And that's something to keep in mind. So whatever you use is going to be a little bit muted based on the base of color that you're putting it on. So whether you're putting it on white, you're going to get obviously a more true color. If you're stenciling it on a gray or a red or, any other color cardstock, remember that it's not going to be that true color. There is a way to help it be more true, and that is to use a pigment ink and then stamp or ink blend on top of that. But I chose not to do that today just because I really wanted to utilize that KRAFT. Since this is for Father's Day, I just liked that look for this particular set of cards I was setting out to make. So if you see here, I penciled in my registration marks, and I shouldn't have done that on that one at the top left there, because now when I use my die cut, it's going to be visible. So I'm going to have to do something a little bit different with that one. And I was really kind of upset with myself, and I tried a few things to get rid of that, and nothing worked. So I'll show you in a little bit how I've ended up taking care of that. So what I've done is I've went ahead and die cut all of those stenciled images out. And what I'm doing here is I went to my stash, and I believe this is a circle die set from Simon. And I just chose some smaller circles, and I die cut it out from a trimmed down panel of that same Meterica KRAFT cardstock. And would use the, stenciled image as a reference for where I was going to place things. And after I was done die cutting all those circles out, I felt like it was just too plain. It looked very unfinished and kind of boring. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing lately is using a background stamp and kind of a tone-on-tone look to add some interest. And that's what I did here. So this is a Tailored Expressions FINELINE script background stamp. It is a red rubber cling stamp, and I am using some wheat ink from Concord and Ninth, and I am just tapping my ink pad very lightly because it's still very juicy onto this stamp with it face up. And then I'm using just a piece of scrap cardstock to just knock off some of that ink because it'd be super, super dark, and I don't want it to distract. I just want it to be a way to add some interest. So I'm tapping the ink down, tapping it off on a scrap piece of paper, and then I'm taking my background to it. Now, my background is a little bit too long, so as you'll see here, I have some blank off to the left-hand side. If you liked that look, you could obviously leave it like that, but I wanted it to be a continuous pattern. So I'm just replacing that, tapping it off again, and then just very lightly tapping. I don't even care if this skips. I don't want it to necessarily be a perfect impression. I kind of wanted it to be a little more distressed looking. So I'm going to continue that on both of the panels that I'm going to put onto the cards, and then I'm also going to do that on the card bases as well. This one I felt needed a little bit more interest, and I went really hot and heavy, and I was like, oh man, I don't like how that looks at all. And I was like, well, let's let it dry back and let's see if it looks a little better. It dried back some. I still wish I wouldn't have went in so hot and heavy, but it did dry back okay. But that is still that wheat ink from Concord and Ninth. I just wish I wouldn't have gone in so hot and heavy and remembered that my ink pad is very juicy. So this is the one that had that pin mark on it. I ended up just taking that to my trimmer, cutting off that pin mark, and did just a little bit more ink blending on that one also. And I was worried that I would absolutely hate that one, but I actually really think that that card ended up being my favorite. So I've just kind of loosely laid out the cards how I think I'm going to want them. I'm going to put some foam squares from Dollar Tree onto the back of a lot of the elements on today's cards. One, I did have to incorporate another smaller circle just to make the pattern on the card on the right look a little more balanced. One of the things you could do if you wanted to is you could wait to do that background stamping with that background stamp until you had those circles in, and then you would have that scripty font all over your circles also. That would be another look you could go for. I just ended up doing them separate and having just kind of that bold in your face color, but if you wanted to have that scripty font be continuous, that would be a way to do that. Just glue all those down and then take that whole panel to your stamp, and then you would have that font, that scripty font all over all of your images. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up the circles, the stenciled circles, but I'm going to glue the other circles down flat into kind of their well, if you will. So I'm going to take this panel, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to glue that down flat because I am going to end up mailing most of these cards. I don't want to have to pay extra postage, so I am going to glue that part down flat and then glue the circles down in their respective little corners. If you were going to hand deliver this card, you could absolutely add all the dimension you wanted to. Or if you were going to put this into a package, a gift package, you could add all the dimension you wanted to. But for me, I'm going to glue this down flat. For the little circles here, I just put a splotch of glue on the back of them and set them into their respective holes. And then I'm putting some magnets over the top of them to let them dry. For these two cards, I did add foam tape to the stenciled image again. And for the trees, I decided to put the trees kind of around each of the stenciled images. And for one of them, I glued the trees in the back down flat and just popped up the tree in the foreground. And then on the other card, I think I put foam tape on the back of all of the elements. And this is the one that, remember, we had to get creative with because we got ink where we didn't want it. But with this design, when I put this tree down, I was like, I could have left that taller and left that in there because I could have used the trees to cover it up. But, hindsight's 20/20, right? So here I'm just removing the release paper off of the back of my foam squares. Again, these foam squares are from Dollar Tree. The foam tape that I put on the back of these images is actually from Amazon. You get a very large roll. It's got a good depth to it. It doesn't have a funny smell, and the release paper comes off very well, and it sticks very well once it's pressed down. So those are the two foam tapes that I'm using today. And then the liquid glue is just some reptile glue. I've enjoyed that glue, and I've been using it for several years now, and really like it. Anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and glue these ones that are in the background down flat, and I have the other ones popped up. And then on the other card, I do believe I had everything popped up. So there's that one all done. Now it's time to work on our sentiment here. So I'm just going to keep this very simple and have them all say the same thing, and use the same stamp and die for all of them. So this die comes from this Tailored Expressions stamp set. I can't remember what this is called, but again, I will list it below. But it has all of these very fun, like, tag shapes to them. My sentiment actually comes from this stamp set from Father's Day. This is like Fine Gentleman, I think is what it's called, from Gina K. Again, I will list it below, but that's where I pulled the Happy Father's Day from. And I'm just using some more of that same Meterica KRAFT cardstock to die cut 4 of these little banners out. And then I will place these in my MISTI and use some more of that Concord and 9th wheat cardstock to stick the greeting out. Once I finally got the greeting where I wanted it and it looked straight and somewhat even side to side, it's not perfect, but it's close enough for government work. I did continue to just lay those into one of the negative pieces and use that as a way to kind of speed up the repetitive process of stamping out all of these greetings on a small, rather small piece of cardstock. I used some more Dollar Tree foam squares to pop up these greetings on the cards. I was trying to figure out placement for these, and I liked them best right here. I felt like with that bright blue behind it, it just helped it stand out some more. I felt like it kind of got lost everywhere else, and I didn't want to put more ink on it because we all know how that went. So here I've just, some of them I glued down flat, like this one right here. I think the rest of them, I did end up popping them up somewhat, just because it helped it kind of cast a little bit of a shadow and give it some more separation from the rest of the card. But after I have all these greetings adhered, these cards are complete. So yeah, this is all 4 cards all done. You could jazz these up however you wanted to. You could, if you wanted to make these for more of like a woman, just switch up the colors and switch up the greeting. And you could make these in any color palette that you like to suit anybody that you're giving them to. Here is where I was thinking about, you know, making that text continuous along those circles. But anyway, so that is the video for today. I appreciate you spending time with me. I hope you felt inspired, and I hope you are ready to make some Father's Day projects. And until then, we'll see you.